Hi, thank you for joining me today. I'm going to be using these 3 new folders. They're by Tim Holtz, made by Sizzix, and 2 of them are 3D folders and 1 is a texture fade. This one is called Reptile, and it is really very versatile. Although the word reptile makes you think of reptile skin, I think you could actually really use it for so many different things. This one here, it's called a tapestry. It's a kind of Baroque tapestry type of a look. Again, I think very versatile. I'll be using this a lot at Christmas time, I'm sure. And these were in the Halloween release. You can see that's a texture fades, but I'll definitely be using them in many different ways, I'm sure. I love this. I just had to show the inside of this. And there's a debossed and an embossed. So this one again is a 3D one, and it is called Cracked. It's absolutely gorgeous. It could definitely be a wood texture, but again, you could use this as rocky, like a rocky texture. It would be really cool to do a little cutout and use that to make rocks in the foreground of a card. So these are the 3 embossing folders I'm going to be using to demo today. I have pre-cut my paper to 6 1/4 by 4 1/4 inches, and I've used mixed media. It's just regular white mixed media. This says manila files that I cut up, and lovely creamy color. These are just some cardstocks and baked papers that I had gel printed, some of them with metallics and some of them with distress oxides. And this is just cardstock. I've chosen 3 colors: a black, a craft stock, and a white. So I am going to start using the tapestry folder and the manila paper. It's got a lovely creamy color already, but I actually don't want it to be this monochromatic color, so I am going to mess up this paper a little bit. And what I mean by that, I'm just going to add a little bit of color. So that is antique linen in a distress oxide, and this is ground espresso. I will also be using old paper as well. So the antique linen is quite close in color to the manila, except it's kind of a little bit grungier. I don't know quite how to put it, and it has a lovely texture being that it's an oxide. So I'm just going to mix a little bit of each color on my craft mat, and here you'll see me grabbing the old paper. The old paper is a bit more green than it appears, so it definitely is a different color to antique linen. And then I'll just spray all of this with water and then pick it up with the paper. No need to do this in slow motion because there's not a lot happening here, just a little bit of adding a little texture into the background. So I'm using the debossed side instead of the embossed side. So this is the debossed side here. And you can actually use these folders either way, and you will see me doing that throughout this. Just adding a little bit of the ground espresso onto the debossed side. I'll run it through my folder, and for the first one I will actually show you this. I'm just running it through my machine that is using the base plate. It is a Sizzix Sidekick and just one of the cutting plates, and I roll it 4 times, so forward and back and forward and back. But after this, other than the tapestry folder, the 3D folders, I literally just run forward and back and I was done. It was just perfectly embossed. I just like a little bit more depth with this one folder, and you can see how gorgeous that this came out. So I've actually basically pushed color into what would normally be the embossed side. This is the embossed side, and I'll just show you what that would be like if I just added a little bit of that brown on top of it, and you can see a little clearer. That's the embossed side, but I've gone for the debossed side, and I think this looks very kind of vintage and very beautiful. So I'm going to use the same color of paper. It's that manila envelope, and this time I'm just adding a little bit of salvaged patina with a blending brush, and I'm not blending it particularly, I'm just adding little bits of color. This is the great thing about using embossing folders, is they just take something that looks like this and make it look so gorgeous. So that's the salvaged patina oxide. Now I'm going to add rusty hinge in the oxide, and I'm adding this to the embossed side. So this is actually going to basically push the color into the paper and leave the raised part plain. So it's a little spritz of water, which is very good to help the paper stretch. Run it through the machine, and this is what it looks like. You can still see those bits of blues, but this is not done yet. And this is one of the techniques that I really love, is instead of just adding one color here or a little bit in the background and then a color on the embossing folder, or even nothing, just embossing paper, which a lot of people do. Here I'm adding this gorgeous color called aged mahogany onto the embossed area, and look at that. Beautiful, just absolutely beautiful. Easily usable for birthday card, but definitely for Christmas. Isn't that absolutely gorgeous? And of course for Halloween. So that looks like it has 4 colors between the color of the background and then the 3 colors I used on it, and then the other one looks like it's got 2 colors. So here I'm going to use a color called Lost Shadow. It's a pale silvery color, and I'm just using plain black cardstock. So I'm going to run that through the machine. These ones again I was running 4 times, and you can see how it's pushed that gray into the background. And I'm just using Sizzix luster wax in the color gold, and I'm very close and very flat with my hand on the table, so that I'm really not getting into any of the grooves. I'm using a tiny little bit on my finger just to highlight the very top of that design. And again, how beautiful is that? So that's one folder 3 ways. And now moving on to the cracked folder. The amazing thing about the 3D folders is just how dimensional these pieces are. It's just absolutely incredible. So I'm choosing a piece of paper that I had jelly printed with distress oxides, and then I had stamped on while it was still wet. I had already previously made this paper, so it was just in my stash. I do like to use up what I have. And I'm just going to show you the colors that I had used to create this background. So this first one is broken china and tumbled glass. Those were used in the background colors, and pretty much in the same technique, putting them onto the mat, little water, and then picking them up on my paper. And then aged mahogany, you can see I've used on the stem, and it looks quite faint because it was really beautifully wet. And then black soot, so I've used the 2 different colors for the stamping. So at the moment you can see leaves on this background, but once I put this through the folder, believe me, you will not even notice that they are leaves, but they will add texture. I mean, look at that beautiful texture that's already in the embossing folder. So it's a good idea to use up your bits and pieces when you create background pieces of paper. It's a good idea to use them in embossing folders, because it just creates something so unique and different. So with this one here, I'm just using the ground espresso distress oxide, and I'm using it on the embossing side, so it's going to be pushing that color into all the grooves and the cracks that are in this folder. And I will wet the paper, just a little spritz of water, and because it is oxide, it will just recharge the colors that are on there, and it will create the most beautiful effect. So I'll pop that close, I'll run that forward and back, and this is what you get. Isn't that absolutely gorgeous? I can't believe how beautiful that looks. I really love how where the leaves were, you can still see some of the colors and interest, but you can no longer tell that those were leaves. This really creates more dimension. Yes, love that. So I'm going to take a piece of the mixed media paper, and this is white mixed media paper, same embossing folder, but now I don't like to just emboss in white. This is Lost Shadow, salvage patina, and old paper that I'm using here to create a little color in the background. So the same technique of smushing my colors down. Here I'm just going to actually do one color at a time, and I'm just doing the old paper and the salvaged patina in this way, and I will show you a really cool way of using Lost Shadow. Oh, I just was so excited when I tried this, and now I use it on lots of times in many different colors. But here I'm just picking up that kind of greenish old paper color, and then I will repeat that with the salvage patina just a little bit down on the mat, adding the water. I'm not drying this in between because I actually don't mind these colors blending, the kind of turquoisey bluish color into the sort of greenish yellowish color. It looks really good. For this technique, I'm actually not worrying about blending the colors together at this point. I just have to dry this paper, and then here's this fabulous thing with Lost Shadow. So when I first bought it, I wasn't crazy about the color, but then I discovered it is actually a beautiful color on its own, but it also has this amazing muting ability. So I didn't want any white to be showing on this paper, and I've used the Lost Shadow, and it's just literally melted these two colors together without actually making them too pastel-y. So I'm using Forest Moss on the inside of the embossing folder. It's a very, very dark yellowish green, and I thought this would really look cool with these two colors. So I've added this onto the embossing side, and this is what most people would think would be the correct side, but I don't think there's a correct side. You can do whatever you want with your material. So look how fabulous that came out. Different from the other one, a lot more muted, but oh, so beautiful. I'll use both of those without blinking. So this is a piece of jelly printed paper, and because I've used a metallic acrylic on it, I have to use VersaFine Clear, which is like an oil-based ink, because oxide will not stay, will not actually make any impression on this paper, which is now sealed with acrylics. So I decided to actually add a little bit of brown too, but it's mostly black. I'm wetting the back of this paper because wetting the front will do nothing. And wow, can you just see how all that metallic was really pushed back quite substantially, and look at all those colors still showing through. Super juicy, super beautiful. Again, I mean, oh, I just was so in love with this. These folders are absolutely gorgeous, they really are. So I decided to do one in a colorway that would be maybe not considered conventional or too wood-like, and that's this purple. It was again jelly printed with distress oxides, and it's in shades of purples and blues. So I decided I would go with this gorgeous deep purple called Villainous Potion. It may look a little bit blue on your screens, but it is the very deepest, most royal shade of purple imaginable. It's stunning. And I'm going to use this on the embossing side. So I'm still working with the cracked folder. I'm just cleaning off any excess that was from the previous colors. And you can see how nice and juicy this deep purple is. Oh, it's just gorgeous. And look at that, isn't it just beautiful? So as lovely as it is by itself, I also wanted to add just a little bit of sheen on here. So I'm using the Sizzix Luster Wax in silver. And I'm not putting it all over the fold or the paper. I'm just going to use it in a few little areas, and I'm not going crazy deep with it. Again, I'm just trying to keep it very much on the surface. Just a little bit of sheen there. I think that's really beautiful background. I think I'm going to use this one for a Halloween card. So here you can see the 4 backgrounds that I've made with this folder called Cracked, and they're all quite different from each other and gorgeous. So I'm using this piece of paper that I've jelly printed, and again I've used acrylics on it, and there's a metallic gold in this acrylic and a metallic green, so it's very metallic at this point in time. And because of the seal on the acrylic, I cannot use the distress oxide, so I'm using a pigment ink. This is VersaFine Clair in Tulip Red. So of course this folder is the reptile one, and I have to say that I had to try red. I just had to try red. I have no idea how this would turn out, but it turns out I actually really loved it. It's amazing to me how one embossing folder can just change a piece of paper. So then still can see the metallic, but it's not as bright and in your face as it was before. It's just gorgeous. So I've decided to use this cardstock. It's a sort of brownish color. It's a little bit more textured on one side and a little bit smoother on the other side. So I'm actually going to want to use the smoother side. Again, I'm using Reptile, but this time I'm going to use the debossing side. So I'm using VersaFine Clair in this sort of deep blue, very beautiful color, medieval, and also VersaFine Clair, and this is like that brown in that lovely deep brown. So because I'm putting 2 colors on at the same time, I'm trying to not overlap them too much. Not that it matters too much with the pigment ink, but I hold it up to the light, I can see that there's some skipped areas, so I'm going to add a little bit more with the blue. I want to make sure that I've covered the whole embossing folder. So I'm going to spray the paper, but I want to spray it on the back side with a little bit of water so that it stretches, but because I'm using the pigment ink, I don't want to emboss on that side. I want to make sure that I'm embossing on the dry side. But the water just lets it stretch a little bit. These 3D embossing folders are super intense. They're very deep and they are really gorgeous. And wow, doesn't that look like a piece of cracked leather? Just stunning to me. I was really happy with how this one came out. And the blue against the brown, of course, you can really see how that changes the color. Here I'm again going in with the blue and the brown, this time on the embossing side, so I'm just using the exact same 2 colors so that you can see the difference, and then I'll just do a little extra add in. So again, I'm spraying on the side that I'm not going to be inking, putting that wet side down for the stretch, and then run it through the folder, forward and back, and there you can see, and you can clearly see that the blue is different from the brown, but it's still not that very bright blue because it's gone against this craft stock. I loved this, and you can definitely see the difference between the 2 pieces. Same folder, same paper, same 2 colors of ink. One embossed, one debossed. And I think this is a brilliant way of showing how that looks. So now I'm going to add this speckled egg on top and give it a bit of a completely different look. And because this is an oxide, I'm just going to take a piece of paper towel and just give it a spritz of water to help oxidize the ink, and just give it a little rub, very flat, just a little pushing into the paper. And boy, look at those 3. Aren't they gorgeous? So I decided I'd do one where I showed you from beginning of how I color the paper in quite a wild way. So I'm starting off with Villainous Potion and what is it? Salvaged Patina. Oh, sorry. I'm going to start with the 2 colors on my mat and just a little spritz of water. And this is just white craft stock that I'm using this time. And really not much has made any difference, to be honest with you, of the different papers that I've used. They've all turned out really good. So I'm just breaking this up a little bit so I don't have 2 solid squares when I put the paper down. I'm just going to dab up a little bit more water and dab up this ink. So I'm just basically trying to cover as much of the paper as I can. You see me picking on white areas and just trying to cover them. I'm not a fan of having any of the white showing through. Of course it's personal, but that's just how I am. I'll just give this a quick dry in between the layers just so that I have some definition of the colors. I am going to do quite a wild color scheme here, so I'm going to show you all of what I do just so that you can see that it's not always a quick and easy if you use a background you've already done. Of course it is. This is Rusty Hinge. And the surprise color, oh, I just love this color, Lumberjack Plaid. It's just the most gorgeous shade of red. It really is. Wait till you see it on paper. So I'm just making kind of bigger splotches with my fingers and then picking up color. So now I just decided that I needed a little bit more of that turquoisey coloring showing through. You can see when it dries how it oxidizes. It's really beautiful. So I went back in with a salvage patina, and again some water to activate it and also thin it down a little bit, make it move around a bit. And you'll see here I'm actually just splotching it on top of the dried colors, so you actually can see the colors underneath. It's really beautiful how the distress oxide layers. If you leave the colors wet, they will just smush into each other and become whatever color the two colors make, or it will just get muddy the more you do this. But if you've dried your layers in between, you can actually retain those colors, as you can see. And I decided I just wanted to get rid of those white patches, so I'm just with a blending tool using this beautiful color salvage patina into all those little areas of white. And then I'm just going to do a final layer with the salvage patina and the villainous potion, that rich purple and that beautiful turquoisey blue. And I'm just splotching this. I'm trying not to smush it too much. I'm just lightly tapping and then just picking up in the odd area that I want some color. And this is the end result. And so it might look like it's quite strong, but once we put this black suit, this is Distress Ink. So this is not oxide. It's going to be a stronger color than the black suit in the oxide, which of course the oxide makes it gray. I'm using the embossed side, and I've sprayed water onto it to really activate that ink. And this is how it turned out. So as much as it looked like really crazy red and purple and blue, it came out beautiful. And now I'm going to add a little bit of this copper. And again, this is the Sizzix Luster Wax. And I'm using just the tiniest little amount on my finger. And again, my finger's almost flat on my work table. So I'm really not putting a lot of the metallic onto it. It's only going onto the very surface, which in this particular embossing folder is hard to see on video, but it's tiny little speckles that are getting the copper. Not a lot of really flat surfaces because it's so dimensional. And it came out absolutely beautiful. And so here's this reptile embossing folder in a few different ways. There's two metallics, and yet look how different they are. One started off metallic, and then one has had metallic added on the very top. And they look really beautiful. And then there's your one that looks like cracked leather. It really looks like cracked leather. It's great. And then this one that I added the oxide on top. And there's your 4 samples. So I've just spread everything out. This is the one called Cracked, and these are the 4 samples I made in Cracked. Again, all different from each other, and all of them very, very beautiful. I love using the metallics and adding little bits of metallic. Just gorgeous. And then these are the ones from the tapestry. I think that is a super versatile folder. Look how beautiful that looks. Very antique looking. So I'm just going to show you how I do my edges. I most often will take a little bit of a darker color. It's not always black, it's not always brown. Sometimes I'll use a purple or a blue. But in this case I am actually using ground espresso in the Distress Oxide. And just a small blending brush. And just put it all the way around. here it is with the darker edge. This really came out beautiful, just beautiful. And so I'll just show you on this one as well. The lighter cardstock I think really lends itself to having a darker edge, and I don't always use browns or blacks. I sometimes will use shades of blues and mahoganies and just whatever strikes my fancy, but in this case I've just kept to the same brown. And then I've decided to do this beautiful dark green. It's called Rainforest, and it is VersaFine Clear again. I'm using the debossed side, and I'm using this beautiful metallic copper. It's a very soft metallic copper cardstock, and this is how it came out, but I decided I really wanted a little bit more happening here, so I'm going to use some acrylic paints. So I'll start off with this lovely turquoisey color, which is very much like the color Salvage Patina. And these are just regular craft store acrylics. And a little bit of black. And just with a paintbrush I'm going to paint that into all the grooves, because I did use the debossing side, so the pattern is actually grooved into the copper paper. And then I'll just wipe some of it off. I'm not going to take all of it off. Add a little bit more turquoise. You can see that sometimes, you know, your first color is not there yet, and you just keep playing with it. And I decided it needed some green, because copper goes quite green as it ages. And this is a kind of yellow leaf green, really pretty color. And again, I'll just wipe some of that off. And then I'll go in finally with some black again. And I'm just going to put this randomly around and use my dry paper towel, rub it in a bit, and now I will buff all the copper. Look how gorgeous that looks. It literally looks like a sheet of copper that's aging. Beautiful. So here are your 4 pieces that are done with the cracked embossing folder. They're all very different from each other, and yet they're just beautiful, each in their own way. And then these 4 are done with the reptile. I love that one. Seriously, just looks like leather to me. And then this one with a little hint of copper on the top, and then the metallic one just came out beautiful. And then this black and gray, and then just with hints of the gold on all the embossed raised surface, came out really beautiful. It's hard to see in this light, but it is really gorgeous. I tried to move the light there, but it didn't really make much difference. Vintage style, and then this beautiful Baroque looking. And I think this is probably my favorite of the lot, this copper, aged copper, beautiful. I'll probably be making cards, and some Halloween cards for sure in here. Thank you very much for joining me. Have a really great day.